Hey guys, tonight we are going to stand in a world that doesn't even exist anymore, on the bottom of a warm, shallow ocean where the Alps haven't yet appeared. Imagine your toes wiggling in sand that will one day be lifted thousands of meters into the sky. The water is clear, sunlight pours through it like honey, and strange, armored fish drift by, giving you the side eye. You are about to witness the slowest, most epic magic trick nature has ever pulled, turning seabed into sky. And just to be honest, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes here without sunscreen, mosquito netting, and a time Mac. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing our little global night owl map fill up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease in. You kneel and scoop up a handful of that soft ocean silt. It smells faintly like salt and life, full of tiny shells and microscopic creatures whose skeletons will one day become chalk and limestone. The year is somewhere around 200 million BCE, give or take a few million. Because time at this scale is politely vague. To your left, a trilobite scuttles along, probably unaware it's about to go extinct. You look up and the sky is unrecognizable, no Alps, no Europe, not even the familiar outline of continents. The ocean stretches warm and lazy, dotted with coral reefs. Imagine the Great Barrier Reef, but bigger, brighter, and completely untouched by snorkel-wearing tourists. The water is shallow enough that sunlight dapples the seafloor in hypnotic patterns. You can almost hear the faint pop and crackle of coral growth, a soothing soundscape that could put anyone to sleep. Geologists call this region the Tethys Ocean, a name that sounds appropriately dreamy for a place destined to vanish. As you drift along the current, fish with armor like plates flash by, looking like something out of a medieval bestiary. They are slow and majestic, barely noticing you. Historians, well, geologists, still argue whether these reefs were teeming like modern ones or more sparsely populated. But either way, it feels like a crowded party under the waves. There are ammonites too, those coiled shell creatures that look like elegant spirals someone carefully designed. You pick one up, knowing its fossilized cousins will be used by future hikers to decorate windowsills in little alpine villages. A soft rumble passes through the seabed. You might think it's your stomach. But no, that's the earth shifting. Plates deep beneath your feet are beginning their slow-motion journey. Africa is inching north toward what will become Europe, though you wouldn't notice unless you stayed here for, say, 10 million years and really paid attention. It's the world's longest game of bumper cars. And you're standing on the track. The water warms slightly. Volcanic vents nearby release bubbles that rise around you, tickling your arms as if the ocean itself is giggling. You catch a glimpse of strange sponges and maybe a primitive sea lily waving like it's at a rock concert. The air above is heavy with moisture, and somewhere a massive reptile glides across the waves, jaws snapping at fish unlucky enough to be near the surface. Even here, where everything seems calm, change is constant. New layers of sediment settle each day. Thin as powdered sugar, they bury shells, skeletons, and entire reef structures. You crouch and press your hand down into the soft seafloor, leaving an impression that, if you're lucky, might last until the next big tectonic shoving match lifts it into the sunlight millions of years later. And this is where the story really begins, in quiet accumulation. Rock builds grain by grain, shell by shell, creating stacks of future mountains while the planet takes a very, very long nap. Your eyelids grow heavy just thinking about it. You might even picture yourself lying flat on that seabed, listening to the distant, comforting crack of tectonic stress like a lullaby. Remember that trilobite? It has wandered off by now, but its cousins will leave behind fossils that tell future scientists exactly how deep and warm this ocean once was. And as you float in this ancient sea, you start to sense something huge coming, something that will eventually take these calm, flat layers and fold them like an accordion until they stand proud and jagged against the sky. But that part of the story waits for you in the next moment. Like a surprise hidden behind the horizon. For now, you just stay still, suspended in that clear water, as the slow machinery of geology hums beneath you, preparing to turn the floor into a future roof of Europe. The water around you grows heavier, as if it senses the tension deep below. You float upward slightly, and suddenly you realize, the calm floor you were standing on is no longer as still as it seemed. Africa, with the patience of a sleepy cat, is pushing north. The movement is microscopic in your lifetime, barely a few centimeters per year, but when you let millions of years pass in a sleepy blink, the collision becomes unstoppable. You look down and see cracks forming in the seabed, delicate at first, like hairline fractures in old porcelain. The sound is faint, an occasional groan, a deep, resonant boom that feels more than it sounds. Somewhere far away, magma wells up through these cracks, adding fresh layers to the ocean floor. It smells faintly of hot iron, a sharp note in the otherwise salty air. You grab hold of a chunk of coral and watch the seafloor slowly buckle. Sediments that once lay flat begin to tilt. You feel like you're standing on a slowly moving escalator, rising inch by inch toward a future skyline. Historians still argue whether the first uplift happened suddenly in dramatic pulses or gradually like bread dough rising under a damp cloth. Either way, you get to watch as the seabed begins to wrinkle like a rug being pushed from one end. And then, this is the best part, you notice entire slabs of limestone sliding over one another, stacking like a giant game of geological lasagna. Each layer is full of fossil shells, trapped in place, some broken, some whole, all silently moving toward a destiny no one asked for, being crushed into mountain peaks. You can almost hear their tiny, shell-encased voices mutter, "We were not built for this." The pressure increases. Rocks deep below transform under heat, turning into marble, schist, and gneiss. You know those streaks and swirls you've seen in countertops or art sculptures? Those are the fingerprints of this colossal compression. The Alps are beginning to form, though at this point they look more like a series of awkward underwater ridges, not the sharp teeth of stone they'll become. The water gets cloudier as debris stirs up. You kick gently, drifting toward what used to be a shallow lagoon, now collapsing into a trench. Whole reefs slide downward, leaving plumes of white chalk dust in the water like a snowstorm. This is tectonic drama at its most majestic, but in slow motion, so slow you could nap through most of it and not miss much. And as you drift, you catch glimpses of the creatures adapting. Some swim away to calmer waters, others die, sink, and become part of the sediment. You think of them as unwilling volunteers donating their skeletons to the future. The Tethys Ocean is getting narrower, squeezed like toothpaste between Africa and Eurasia. Each squeeze raises the seafloor higher. Above the waves, the continents themselves start to shift like giant puzzle pieces reluctantly locking into place. You surface and look around. New islands poke through, smelling of fresh volcanic rock. The sun glints off wet stone. The air tastes sharper now, almost metallic. You brush your fingers along a jagged edge of freshly lifted seabed and marvel. This used to be under hundreds of meters of water, and now it's drying under your feet. At night, you lie back on a newborn island, looking up at unfamiliar stars. The constellations aren't where you expect them to be, because millions of years have passed and the sky itself has drifted. Somewhere a primitive lizard scuttles by, annoyed that you're lying in its sunbathing spot. You roll over and chuckle softly, realizing that if anyone could see you, you'd look like the laziest explorer ever, just lying there while entire continents collide under you. When morning comes, you notice ridges forming in the distance. They are still gentle, rounded, not yet the spiky Alps we know today, but they're rising, and with each millimeter you sense the pressure building. Geologists call this the alpine orogeny, a term that sounds fancy enough to impress someone at a dinner party. Orogeny just means mountain building, but it feels good to say it aloud, like a secret spell. As you wander across this half-formed landscape, you find pools of trapped seawater steaming in the heat. Some are home to strange fish that will never escape, slowly evolving into weird new forms. Others dry completely, leaving behind salt flats that glint under the sun like sheets of glass. You crouch, touch the crystals, and lick one out of pure curiosity. It tastes exactly like the sea it once was. You take a slow breath and sit cross-legged on the rising ground. The earth continues its slow-motion wrestling match beneath you, and you can almost imagine the continents grumbling, pushing, refusing to let go. Somewhere far to the south, Africa keeps nudging forward, and you, lucky time traveler that you are, get to watch as seabed after seabed folds skyward, preparing to become the Alps you'll one day hike, ski, or paint in watercolors. The first real mountains are starting to rise now, and you feel it in your calves as you trudge uphill over ground that didn't even exist a few million years ago. What were once flat layers of seabed are now tilted toward the sky at dramatic angles. Like a stack of books someone kicked over. You pause, plant your hands on your knees, and laugh softly. These are the baby Alps, and even in their toddler phase, they're already making you work for it. The air is different up here. Cooler, thinner, carrying the faint scent of wet stone and moss just beginning to grow. You reach down and pick up a rock. It's limestone, flecked with fossils. You turn it over and stare at the imprint of a shell. Perfectly preserved, as if the creature was alive just last week. Historians still argue whether some of these layers were formed in shallow lagoons or deeper waters. But either way, the fossils tell you that this used to be a bustling seafloor neighborhood. Now it crunches under your boots. You scramble higher, and the landscape becomes dramatic. Enormous ridges stretch before you, some jagged, some rounded, all twisted like a rumpled bedsheet. The power of the collision between Africa and Eurasia is right there. Frozen in stone folds, you run your hand along a vertical wall of rock, tracing its stripes like a barcode that records millions of years of Earth's history. If you could scan it with a supermarket reader, it would probably just beep and say, "Geology nerd alert." A low rumble shakes the ground under you, not dangerous. Just a reminder that the planet is still shifting. Somewhere deep below, rocks are grinding together, producing a sound like distant thunder. You sit down and let it vibrate through your bones. It's strangely soothing, like the purr of a very large cat. Peaks begin to emerge, piercing the sky. Snow gathers on the tallest ones, though it melts quickly in the still warm climate. Glacial ice hasn't come yet. That's for later, but the first alpine meadows are beginning to form in the lower valleys. Tiny flowers push up between boulders, painting the ground with dots of yellow and purple. You lie back in the grass and stare up at a peak that wasn't here yesterday, or last century, or last millennium. The Alps are truly being born in front of you. And here's a quirky tidbit. Geologists believe the Alps are still rising today, even if it's only about a millimeter or so per year. Imagine if you had to adjust the height of every ski lift annually. It would drive engineers mad. But for now, it just means you're sitting in a landscape that is literally getting taller as you nap. You make your way to a cliff edge and look down. Rivers are beginning to cut through the newly lifted terrain, carving V-shaped valleys into the rock. Waterfalls crash down from ledges, creating misty rainbows in the sunlight. The sound is deafening but oddly peaceful. A natural white noise machine on a planetary scale. You cup your hands, drink from a cold stream, and it tastes like pure minerals, sharp and metallic. Clouds gather over the peaks, drawn to the new heights that force the air upward. The weather grows moody and unpredictable, as if the sky itself is trying to decide whether to bless the mountains with rain or test them with lightning. You watch a storm roll in, feel the first drops hit your face, and find a shallow cave to shelter in. The cave is small and smells faintly of wet clay. You sit inside, listening to thunder echo through the still-forming valleys, and smile at how alive this newborn world feels. When the storm clears, you step out and find that the rain has polished the rocks, making them gleam in the late sunlight. A rainbow arches across the sky, perfectly framing the jagged peaks. It's almost too picturesque, like a desktop wallpaper no one asked for but everyone would secretly download. You take a deep breath of that fresh, post-rain air and start climbing again. The higher you go, the more dramatic the view becomes. Peaks upon peaks, layers of stone overlapping like pages in a book you can't stop reading. Somewhere, a boulder the size of a small house tumbles down with a roar, reminding you that this is still a work in progress. The Alps aren't peaceful yet, they're still restless, still rearranging themselves for the big debut. By the time the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the ridges, You've found a ledge to sit on. Below you, entire valleys are lit with golden light. Above, the peaks glow pink as the last rays hit them. You pull your knees to your chest, feeling the chill creep in, and watch as the first stars prick the sky. This mountain range is just getting started, and you know the next act will be even more dramatic, colder, icier, and much, much louder. The chill hits you before the first glacier even appears. You wake up one morning on your rocky ledge, and the air feels sharper, colder, like someone turned down the thermostat on the entire planet. Ice ages have arrived, and the Alps are about to get a very thorough makeover. You rub your hands together, breath fogging in front of your face, and look out across the peaks, already dusted with a thin coat of snow that refuses to melt. Over time, snow piles up season after season, layer after layer, until it compacts into ice. And not just any ice, this is glacier ice. Thick and heavy, a slow-moving river of frozen time. You watch as the first glaciers begin to crawl down the mountainsides, scraping the rock like a giant cosmic ice cream scoop. The sound is eerie, a deep, groaning creak, as though the earth itself is sighing in its sleep. You step carefully across the ice, peering down through blue cracks that seem to stretch forever. It feels both terrifying and hypnotic. Historians still argue whether these first Ice Age glaciations happened in pulses or one long chill. But you're here to see it as one sweeping transformation. The U-shaped valleys you know from postcards are being carved right now. Every rock and boulder dragged along like sprinkles on nature's cake. The grinding is relentless. You can see striations, long scratches, etched into bedrock by stones trapped under the ice. You reach down and run your fingers over one, feeling how smooth the rock has become. It's as though the mountains are being polished to a high shine. You chuckle softly. Mother Nature is giving the Alps a spa day. Eventually, the glaciers retreat a little, leaving behind gifts. Sparkling blue lakes where meltwater pools, moraine ridges made of dumped rock, and valleys that now have that iconic U-shape. You find yourself standing by the edge of a newborn lake. Its water so still and clear it looks like a mirror. You toss in a pebble and watch the ripples spread slowly. The only movement in this frozen silence. Animals begin to appear, woolly mammoths in the distance, cautiously testing the icy slopes, their shaggy coats dusted with snow. You pull your own imaginary coat tighter and grin at the sight of them. A curious reindeer trots past, leaving delicate hoofprints in the snow. Somewhere above, an eagle circles lazily, as if scouting for the first alpine picnic. And then there are the avalanches. The snow builds up too much on one slope, and suddenly it gives way with a muffled whump. The whole mountainside slides, roaring like a freight train. You watch in awe as clouds of white powder billow up, swallowing the valley below. When it's over, the silence returns just as suddenly, so complete it almost rings in your ears. Night falls, and the stars seem closer than ever, reflecting on the glacier surfaces. You sit near the lake, pulling your knees up to your chest for warmth. The air is so crisp you feel like you could break it. Somewhere far away, ice cracks with a sound like distant gunfire. You smile. Nature's percussion section is wide awake tonight. One quirky detail you notice. Tiny alpine flowers somehow manage to bloom right near the edge of the ice. Defiantly colorful against the endless white. You crouch to smell them, and they give off the faintest, sweetest scent. It's like the mountains themselves are whispering, "Don't worry, this cold won't last forever." Over thousands of years, the glaciers advance and retreat again and again, like a slow heartbeat. Each time they carve deeper, leaving the Alps more dramatic, more sculpted. You look up at the towering peaks, now sharp and rugged, and realize this is the version of the Alps that will someday inspire painters, poets, and postcard makers. You lie back in the snow, surprisingly comfortable, and watch as the aurora flickers faintly on the horizon, green curtains of light swaying in the frozen night. You can almost hear them rustle, a soft shish sound that lulls you closer to sleep. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize the Alps have finished their Ice Age spa treatment. They're finally ready for humans to come wandering through and leave their first footprints. The first footprints arrive softly, as if even early humans are holding their breath. You wake to find the world a little warmer. The glaciers retreating again and leaving green meadows in their wake. The air smells of wet earth and pine sap, a hint of spring finally breaking through the long Ice Age silence. You follow a faint trail and there, far in the distance, see them, small groups of hunter-gatherers, bundled in furs, cautiously picking their way across the valleys. You fall into step behind them, careful not to startle anyone. They move quietly, carrying stone-tipped spears and baskets woven from reeds. Every so often, one of them pauses, kneels, and touches the ground, as if reading the snow like a book. They know the mountains are alive, shifting, and they treat this new world with a kind of reverence you can feel in your chest. One night, you share their fire. Sparks leap into the starry sky while the group roasts whatever they caught that day, probably ibex or red deer. The smell is smoky, mouth-watering, and oddly comforting. A child hands you a piece of roasted root, and you bite into it. It tastes earthy, almost sweet. You smile and nod, earning a grin from the child's mother. A man begins to hum softly, a low, rhythmic tune. The others join in, and soon the valley seems to hum with them. Historians still argue whether this kind of music was meant for rituals or simply to pass the time. But either way, it's mesmerizing. The sound bounces off the mountain walls, echoing back as if the Alps themselves are singing along. The next morning, you climb higher with the group as they search for a pass through the peaks. It's slow going, the ground still slick from melting ice. You laugh quietly as one of the hunters mutters something under his breath after slipping. Apparently, grumbling about mountain paths is a timeless human tradition. Then you find him, a lone figure lying half buried in the snow. Frozen in time, it's eerily quiet around him. His clothing is made of stitched hides, and beside him lies a copper axe with a polished blade. You crouch, realizing you might be staring at someone like Otzi, the famous Iceman who would be discovered by hikers thousands of years later. You whisper a quiet hello, a strange mix of sadness and awe washing over you. The group performs a small gesture, perhaps a prayer, perhaps just respect, and continues on. You follow, the image of the Iceman lingering in your mind. You think about how future scientists will study him, piecing together what he ate for his last meal, what illnesses he had, even how he may have met his end. For now, though, he rests in peace under his icy blanket. As you descend into a green valley, you notice stone tools scattered near a stream, flakes of flint where someone sat and worked hours ago. You pick one up, feeling its sharp edge. It's almost absurd how fresh it feels, like the maker just stepped away for a snack. You leave it where it is, a quiet thank you to the unknown artisan. That night, you lie on a bed of spruce branches, staring at the stars. The fire has died down to embers, glowing like tiny red eyes in the dark. An owl calls from somewhere nearby, and you pull the fur blanket tighter around you. There is no noise of cars, no hum of electricity, just wind through the pines and the faint crack of settling snow. It's a perfect lullaby. By the time dawn breaks, the group is gone, moving on to find new hunting grounds. You stand alone in the clearing, watching the mist rise from the valley floor. It feels as though the Alps themselves are exhaling after a long night. You take one last deep breath, the cool air filling your lungs, and follow the tracks heading toward the next ridge. Human history in these mountains is just beginning, and soon more permanent settlements will appear, bringing farming, herding, and the first whispered legends about spirits hiding in the high passes. You follow the footprints through the centuries, watching as the mountains become more than just a place to pass through, they become a place to live. The air feels warmer, the grass thicker under your feet. In a small clearing, you see the first signs of farming, rough wooden fences marking off patches of barley and wheat. Goats grazing nearby, bells clanging softly as they wander. The smell of smoke drifts from a distant hut, where someone is likely brewing beer in a clay pot. Life is still harsh here. Winters are long and dark, and avalanches sometimes roar down without warning. But people are stubborn creatures, and you watch as they carve terraces into the hillsides, guiding meltwater into channels to keep crops alive. At night, families gather in simple wooden huts around fires, their voices low as they tell stories about the mountain spirits, some benevolent, others tricksters, some downright terrifying. One afternoon, you watch as a small village gathers for what looks like a seasonal festival. They dance in a circle, wearing crowns of alpine flowers and ringing cowbells in a steady rhythm, as though calling to the mountains themselves. Someone pours fresh milk onto the ground as an offering. A white splash against the dark soil. You can almost feel the earth smile. Then the Romans arrive. The mood changes. The sound of marching feet, the clatter of tools, and the shouts of engineers directing workers. You walk along newly carved roads paved with stone, marveling at how straight they are, cutting through valleys and climbing into mountain passes. Soon you see milestones, carved with Latin inscriptions, standing proudly like sentinels along the way. You stop at a way station where Roman soldiers rest, sharing wine and bread. They laugh about the cold, about the stubborn mountain tribes who live higher up, and about how much they miss the warmth of Rome. One of them points to a distant peak and jokes that the gods must live up there because no sane man would choose to. But the Romans don't just pass through, they leave their mark. They build bridges, aqueducts, and fortifications. They bring trade, coins, and new gods to the valleys. You find yourself standing in a small temple dedicated to Mercury, the messenger god, whose statues are often placed near dangerous crossings as if to watch over travelers. On another day, you witness Hannibal's army trudging through a narrow pass, elephants lumbering in the snow. The air is filled with the sound of grunting animals, shouting men, and the occasional trumpet call from the massive creatures. It is chaotic, strange, and oddly impressive, proof that even the mightiest armies must bow to the Alps' power. When the empire eventually falls, the roads crumble, centuries of war, migration, and rebuilding follow. You see medieval pilgrims trudging through sleet toward distant shrines, merchants leading caravans of mules laden with salt, and herders driving cattle to summer pastures. The mountains are no longer just a barrier, they are lifelines for trade, faith, and survival. You stop in a stone-walled monastery perched high above a valley. Inside, monks work quietly by candlelight, copying manuscripts by hand. The smell of ink and beeswax fills the air. Outside, their sheep graze peacefully, bells ringing in the wind. The Alps have become a place of prayer as much as a place of passage. When the sun sets, you stand on a ridge and look out at the vast expanse of peaks, now dotted with faint glows from village fires. You realize that human life here has taken root. The Alps are no longer silent, they are alive with voices, songs, prayers, and the steady rhythm of generations learning to live with, not against. The mountains. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, and you shiver, not from fear, but from the strange beauty of it. This is a land where danger and wonder walk hand in hand. The fires in the valleys burn lower as centuries slip by, and you notice the villages have grown sturdier. Stone replaces wood in many homes, and alpine pastures look carefully managed. You walk through a narrow cobblestone street where children chase each other, their laughter mixing with the steady clang of cowbells. Smoke curls from chimneys, carrying the smell of bread baking in stone ovens. It's the Middle Ages, and life is still precarious, but it has a rhythm now. You watch women spinning wool, men sharpening scythes, and herders leading cattle along steep trails. In the evenings, everyone gathers in the largest house to share news: a wolf sighting, a snowstorm coming, a neighbor who saw strange lights on the peak last night. The church bell rings at dawn and dusk, and it feels like the mountains themselves keep time with its tolling. You find yourself standing in a small stone chapel lit by candles, where a fresco shows Saint Bernard guiding travelers through a snowy pass. A monk tells you that the pass is so dangerous that they keep dogs, massive, gentle creatures, to rescue travelers lost in the snow. You scratch one behind the ears, and it leans its great head against your knee. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers believed the Alps were cursed or blessed. But judging by the songs you hear, half prayer, half lullaby, it might have been a mix of both. People here live close to death, but also close to beauty. At night, the stars blaze like scattered diamonds, and you can see the Milky Way stretched out over the peaks. Trade grows busier. You pass merchants leading trains of mules carrying salt, wine, and cloth. At a mountain market, you see a pile of strange goods: amber beads from the Baltic, silk from far-off lands, even spices. You can't help but grin when a merchant offers you dried cheese so hard it could double as a weapon. One day, you watch a traveling storyteller entertain a crowd in the village square. His tales are wild: dragons sleeping under glaciers, knights battling mountain trolls, shepherds who speak with the wind. People laugh and cheer, and for a moment you almost believe him. The seasons keep turning. You watch farmers building avalanche barriers out of logs, an early attempt at mountain engineering. You join a haymaking festival, swinging a wooden rake until your arms ache, then sitting down with everyone to eat cheese, rye bread, and drink sour ale. Someone plays a hurdy-gurdy, and you almost fall asleep right there in the field. The plague years come, and you feel the air grow heavy. Villages empty out, prayers grow louder, and bells toll more often. But the Alps endure, and so do their people. When the worst passes, life begins again. Children are born, crops grow, and the bells ring once more. One crisp morning, you watch a procession of monks cross a high pass, their black robes flapping in the wind. They carry books and scrolls, knowledge they're determined to protect from war and fire. Inside their monastery, you notice a curious debate. Some argue that the mountains are proof of divine punishment, remnants of Noah's flood, while others suggest they might hold secrets of the earth's creation. You lean closer, fascinated, as their argument fades into the candlelight. When evening falls, you find yourself in a timbered farmhouse. A grandmother tells you to sit near the hearth and hands you a bowl of warm broth. Outside, snowflakes drift down, covering the world in silence. For a moment, the Alps feel less like a challenge and more like a cradle, holding everything in quiet balance. You stretch out by the fire, listening to distant bells, and wonder if the mountains are changing you too, making you slower, quieter, maybe wiser. Spring arrives again, and with it a shift in the mood of the mountains. You notice a new kind of traveler appearing on the trails: men with notebooks, compasses, and strange measuring sticks. The Renaissance is here, and curiosity seems to have taken root even at these altitudes. You follow one such traveler, a natural philosopher with a floppy hat and a beard that probably hasn't seen a comb in months. He stops every few steps to sketch plans, collect stones, and write in cramped Latin. At one point he squints up at a peak and mutters about whether it might actually have been part of the ocean floor once. You chuckle under your breath, if only he knew how right he was. Historians still argue whether these early explorers were scientists, artists, or just wealthy eccentrics looking for a hobby. Whatever they were, they have a habit of dragging you along on risky climbs just to get a better view. You find yourself standing on a narrow ledge, wind whipping your cloak, as your companion triumphantly shouts, "Observe, this rock is full of seashells," and nearly drops it on his own foot. In a mountain town, you visit a workshop where a cartographer draws the Alps with ink and quill, trying to tame the chaos of ridges and valleys onto a flat piece of parchment. He grumbles that no two travelers can agree on where one valley ends and another begins. You offer to hold his inkpot, and he rewards you with a story about a supposed dragon sighting near a glacier. Or maybe it was just a very large goat. He shrugs. Back on the trail, you meet a painter carrying a wooden easel. He sets it down and begins to capture the play of light on a snowy peak, muttering about how the shadows move too quickly for his liking. You stand quietly so as not to disturb him, even though your feet are freezing. By evening, you find yourself in a small alpine inn, where travelers sit around a long wooden table swapping theories. One claims that the mountains were formed by a great earthquake. Another insists they were lifted by giants. Someone leans in and whispers that the Alps might be hollow, filled with caverns of crystal and hidden kingdoms. You sip from a cup of hot wine, half amused, half enchanted by the thought. As days pass, you see more signs of this intellectual fever. Scholars collect fossils, alchemists look for rare minerals, and physicians argue about whether mountain air can cure melancholy. You even meet a man who insists that living at high altitude makes people more virtuous. You smile politely, wondering if he's simply dizzy from the thin air. One morning, you stumble upon a curious gathering, a group of men and women debating the very age of the earth. Some insist it must be a few thousand years old. Others suggest it is far older than anyone imagines. Their voices rise, hands wave, and at last they agree to disagree. You slip away before they can ask your opinion. You continue on, passing stone bridges, high passes, and sleepy villages. The more time you spend among these thinkers and artists, the more you feel that the Alps are no longer just obstacles. They've become subjects of wonder, places that inspire awe instead of dread. One evening, you stand on a ridge watching the sun set behind the Matterhorn. The peak glows pink, then orange, then slips into a deep purple shadow. You can almost hear the mountain breathing. For a moment, you think about all the hands sketching, measuring, and writing, trying to capture this very scene. You know they will never quite succeed, but maybe that's the point. When night falls, you lie down on a patch of soft grass and feel the ground still warm from the day's sun. Somewhere down the slope, a shepherd sings a wordless tune to his flock, and the sound rises to meet the stars. The world suddenly feels noisier. You wake one morning to the hiss of steam and the clank of iron wheels. And you realize the industrial era has arrived. The mountain air now carries a faint smell of coal smoke, and you can hear the distant chug-chug of a locomotive as it winds its way up a newly built track. You climb aboard one of these early trains, finding a wooden seat polished smooth by countless travelers. The engine wheezes like a tired dragon, and you feel the whole carriage shudder as it climbs the incline. Around you sit well-dressed Victorians with enormous hats, sketching peaks in little notebooks or nibbling biscuits from travel tins. A man in a stiff collar points at a glacier and declares loudly that he has discovered, as if the locals who live here every day somehow hadn't noticed. You smother a laugh. Historians still argue whether these trains ruined the quiet solitude of the Alps or simply made them accessible to more dreamers. What's clear is that life in the valleys begins to shift. Hotels sprout up along scenic passes, promising hot baths and mountain views. Alpine guides find themselves hired by curious tourists eager to climb dangerous peaks for fun. You follow a group of early mountaineers as they strap on woolen knickerbockers, grab ice axes, and start trudging up a glacier. They rope themselves together, which seems both reassuring and slightly terrifying. At one point, one of them slips, dangling briefly over a crevasse before being yanked back by his companions. When they finally reach the summit, they wave a flag and cheer, as if the mountain had been conquered rather than simply tolerated their presence. Down in the valleys, you wander into a spa town where wealthy visitors sip mineral water said to cure everything from gout to heartbreak. A band plays softly under a gazebo, and you overhear a heated debate about whether mountain air strengthens the lungs or gives one a permanent chill. You consider offering your own opinion but settle for another sip of the slightly sulfurous water. New inventions arrive one after another. You ride a funicular up a steep slope, marveling at how the wooden car clatters yet somehow stays on the tracks. You visit an alpine sanatorium, where patients recline on balconies in heavy blankets, breathing deeply as doctors nod approvingly. Even the winter is changing. You watch as adventurous souls strap long wooden planks to their boots and hurl themselves downhill. Skiing is being born. At first it looks like a clumsy accident waiting to happen, but soon you see children laughing as they race each other through the snow. Tourism begins to boom. Postcards show off glittering peaks. Posters invite city dwellers to take the air in the Alps, and suddenly everyone seems to have a favorite mountain pass. You overhear an English visitor complaining that the cows are too loud, while a French artist declares them perfectly picturesque. One evening, you sit in the dining room of a grand mountain hotel with red velvet curtains and chandeliers. Guests chatter in a half-dozen languages, and you enjoy the strange intimacy of sharing a table with strangers. Outside the windows, lightning flickers over the peaks, and everyone pauses to admire the show. Later, you step outside onto a balcony and breathe in the cool, rain-washed air. Somewhere down the valley, a train whistles. The mountains feel different now, not lonely, not dangerous, but like an immense playground buzzing with human curiosity. You fall asleep to the steady hum of progress, the hiss of steam, the clatter of hooves, the laughter of travelers who have come to seek what you have been living all along. The 20th century sweeps over the Alps like a fresh wind, and you sense the mountains settling into a strange balance, part timeless wilderness, part stage for human ambition. You sit on a grassy slope watching climbers in bright gear ascend a famous peak. Their ropes are lighter now, their boots engineered for grip. And yet they still pause to catch their breath where you once saw shepherds rest with their flocks. Far below, you hear the distant hum of cars climbing switchback roads that would have been unimaginable centuries ago. Tourists spill out of buses, cameras in hand, eager to capture what no photograph can truly hold. You stroll into a cable car station and step into a glass cabin that glides silently upward, carrying you over forests, past waterfalls, and nearly into the clouds. It feels effortless, but you know somewhere deep below, the earth is still shifting, still grinding its slow tectonic dance. Historians still argue whether modern life has tamed the Alps or merely dressed them up for a show. Ski resorts now sparkle with neon lights at night, offering hot cocoa and live music, while just beyond the ski runs, avalanches still thunder down untouched slopes. You watch one from a safe distance, it moves like liquid marble, roaring for a moment and then falling into silence. You spend a summer evening at a mountain hut, sharing a table with hikers from all over the world. They trade trail stories, blisters compared like badges of honor, and someone passes you a mug of steaming tea. A young guide tells you that the Alps still rise a few millimeters each year, as if stretching toward the stars. You look up and wonder how much higher they will climb before anyone notices. By day you wander through alpine meadows buzzing with bees, the air rich with the smell of pine and wildflowers. By night you watch satellites trace thin silver lines across the sky. In the distance, you spot the lights of a village festival, accordion music, laughter, the smell of roasting chestnuts. You smile, knowing this rhythm is older than all the science, older than all the maps. Even now, the Alps keep secrets, caves hide ancient tools, glaciers reveal the bodies of lost travelers, and deep beneath the surface, rock continues to fold and shift. You press your hand to the ground and feel, or maybe just imagine, the faintest tremor. The mountains aren't done telling their story. As the stars wheel overhead, you feel a stillness settle around you. The mountains are dark shapes against the sky, quiet, waiting, and in that quiet, you feel small, but not insignificant. You feel like you are exactly where you're supposed to be. The wind down begins almost without your noticing. Your breathing slows, matching the soft rustle of grass in the night breeze. The peaks around you fade into silhouettes, and even the air seems to soften, carrying the faint scent of snow. You imagine the mountains breathing with you, slow, steady, unhurried. Somewhere, far below, a stream murmurs its way down to the valley, a lullaby older than any song. The night deepens, stars multiplying until they seem to drip light onto the peaks. You think of all the lives that have passed through here, Neolithic hunters, Roman legionnaires, pilgrims, painters, train passengers, and realize the Alps have watched them all with patient silence. They'll keep watching long after you've moved on. You let that thought rock you gently, like lying in the palm of something vast and kind. The last sounds you notice are the faint clink of cowbells on a distant slope and the sigh of wind through the pines. And then, finally, nothing but quiet.